Every day you put your life on the line to protect and serve. Who's protecting you? United Badges Insurance Services operates as a dedicated resource for the first responder public safety community. Serving thousands of first responders, United Badges offers a wide range of products including commercial insurance, group accident and health insurance, and personal insurance such as auto, home, renters, rental properties, vacation properties, boat, motorcycle, RVs, flood, and umbrella. United Badges serves active and retired public safety personnel, public safety agencies, public safety associations, public safety support businesses, and public safety families and friends. Experience the United Badges difference. Call 800-566-5990 or visit unitedbadges.com to request your free insurance quote today. United Badges Insurance Services is a proud strategic partner of the Florida Deputy Sheriff's Association. Applicants are individually underwritten by each respective insurance carrier and subject to insurance policy terms and conditions. Not available in all states. Promotional material for descriptive purposes only. Welcome to The Tactical Pause, the official podcast of the Florida Deputy Sheriff's Association. I'm John Creamer, Deputy Executive Director of FDSA. Each episode, I sit down with law enforcement thought leaders to tackle critical issues shaping the future of public safety. Together, we'll explore key topics that empower law enforcement professionals to navigate challenges, lead with confidence, and advance their careers. Take a pause, gain valuable insights, and lead your career with purpose. Thanks for listening. And joining me for this podcast is my friend, Dr. Michael Steele. Dr. Steele is a former United States Marine, and he's retired from the Orange County Sheriff's Office in Orlando, Florida. And now Dr. Steele has his Ed.D, and he is a school administrator in the state of Alabama. So, dear listeners, why would we have somebody with Dr. Steele's experience on our show today? And I think you're going to be fascinated of how we came to this pathway and how I met Mike and the things that he can bring to deputies and other first responders across the state. So, Mike, welcome to the podcast. I'm delighted to have you. You and I have done a lot of things over the last few years, and it's thrilling to have you on the podcast.
Well, John, it's my honor, and the last couple of years have flown by, but we've had some good times, and we've helped a lot of people, I think, and helped ourselves actually, and learned a lot. And it's been amazing. I really appreciate you and the Florida Deputy Sheriff's Association for everything they do to support law enforcement in Florida.
Well, thank you. So, Mike, let's get into it. So you grew up kind of bouncing around Florida, and at some point you graduated high school in Tallahassee. And then from there, you went on to become a jarhead. How did that come to be? What's the story behind that?
Story behind that is that, I had a very tumultuous upbringing. I found myself in Tallahassee, Florida in high school. I remember Gunnery Sergeant Robbie Winchester coming to my school in his dress blues, and I thought, wow, that is sharp. I like that, but that was not my plan at all. My plan was to go on and be a All-American linebacker at Florida State and stuff like that, and I wasn't good enough to do that. So out of necessity and a little desperation, I remember walking to the recruiting station and talking to the Gunnery Sergeant Winchester. He was actually taking somebody out to do the ASVAB, and I went with him on the spot. Took the ASVAB. I don't remember what I got, but it was enough to get in the Marine Corps. And I signed up. Right there on the spot. A couple of weeks later, now it's different now, but back then you could actually get to Parris Island, and with less than a month, I was there in 2 weeks. And I've never looked back. I've loved every minute of the Marine Corps. I wish I would have stayed in for 30 years sometimes. I ended up being a water safety survival instructor, which they call now a combat swimming instructor. And I fell in love with teaching people at that. I was 19 years old, and I was teaching people how to survive in the water. And I fell in love with just being able to help people. And it seemed natural when I got out of the Marine Corps to go into law enforcement. So I was in the Orange County Sheriff's Office for about roughly 10 years. And then in that time, I did my patrol time. I was a field training officer, SWAT team member, a hostage negotiator. I did a couple different things over the 10-year period. One of the things I loved the most, though, is when they came out with the human diversity instructor position. I really was fascinated by that, and I volunteered and started teaching human diversity, and a very challenging class to teach, but awesome to teach. And then I became a firearms instructor and started doing post-traumatic stress syndrome training and counseling and stuff like that. So I just fell in love with leadership. I fell in love with teaching people, and that's kind of how you and I ended up being together.
Yeah. So you've already hit on some really good topics, Mike, just in our conversation in the way that I know you. But let's talk for a second about what is the ethos of the Marine Corps. What drew you to that? Besides, Gunny Winchester. What drew you to that? What's the ethos, and how has that carried you throughout your life?
Honor, courage, commitment, John, and I identify with that a lot. I could have gone, to be honest with you, I barely graduated from high school. I could have gone either way, to be honest with you, if I didn't have an amazing older brother and an incredible youth group leader in Robin Cooter and my brother Joe. I probably would have gone the other way, unfortunately. And that's fast forward to being a school administrator. I want to help as many kids as I can to realize their potential and not go the other way and go down a path or go on a journey of honor and courage and commitment. So I wanted to be the best. The Marine Corps is the best. There's nobody's going to dispute that, and it's challenging. I joined without telling anybody. I was honorably promoted out of boot camp, and I loved everything about it. I loved how hard it was. I loved what it meant. I loved how I felt after a run or something very challenging, and I just wanted to live my life that way.
Yeah, my father was in the Marine Corps, and some of my best friends were, and it's you're different, and I appreciate your service, and I'm sure all the listeners can readily identify and appreciate your service. But Mike, what was the theme or the ethos down in Orange County with the sheriff's office? What drew you to Orange County, and then what did you take away from your time in the green polyester down there?
Well, I had the best time in Orange County Sheriff's Office, and I served. Well, everybody's going to say this, and that's great. But I served with some of the most amazing men and women that you can ever meet, and it was just such an honor to serve with them. But and anybody that remembers me or knows me, they'll understand. They'll be shaking their heads when they hear this. I didn't always prosper in those 10 years because I came into the service out of the military, and I really didn't have my first. It's ironic because your first leader can be amazing and you can learn so many things, but my first leader was not. And so I didn't really learn a lot. So I was always stepping on myself. Now, don't get me wrong, I was highly professional, and I wanted to catch bad people. I wanted to really help the community by catching bad people. But a gentleman by the name of Pete Marcus was about to discipline me, and he told me, he said, Mike, I'll put you up against any two deputies in the department on felony arrest, but it's not just about that. It's about helping the little old lady cross the street. And as he was taking my badge for 2 days, I understood that. And I couldn't believe how good I was feeling about being suspended for 2 days. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I felt amazing. He made me feel amazing. And then I learned so much from that. And so, you go on and you start coming across people on your path, and you just start learning and you start making mistakes and you learn from those mistakes. And so it was just amazing to be on the SWAT team with some of the most incredible men, and to be as a hostage negotiator, or to be even a school resource officer, which I ended my career as a auto theft detective, but I served in the school as a school resource officer as well. Love that. That's what encouraged me. I worked for a principal named Dr. Dan Buckman. And I said to myself, after 10 years in law enforcement, that's what I want to do that now. And I want to be a principal. So I started going back to school and got my doctorate, and the rest is kind of history from that perspective. But no, I love being in the Orange County Sheriff's Office. I still keep in touch with a lot of the men and women that I served with there. Now, I'll give you one good example. I worked for a sergeant named Willa Beckley, and the way she ran her squad, the way she taught, the way she held you accountable, the way she made you feel safe to come to her when you didn't agree with something or you needed understanding on things. I learned so much from her. And, I just recently told her that on Facebook about a year ago, but I don't think I ever really told her how much it meant to me. But at the time, I didn't realize how much it meant to me until I started kind of coming into my own leadership and my own leadership research and my own leadership journey.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned a couple of things. Is we learn just as much from a bad leader as a good leader, and I bet you could name names about bad leaders you had that were toxic and showed you the pathway of what not to do. And then the good leaders, I'm still in touch with many of the leaders that led me, that were father figures or were huge figures in my life, and I still reach out to them via Facebook or at a luncheon and things like that. So that's That's important, and I'm sure you validated her when you did that, you know?
Well, you don't know what you don't know sometimes, John, and people tell you years later. I had a gentleman reach out to me and he said, on Facebook. He said, "Mike, when you showed up on the scene, I knew I was going to be okay, but I never knew he felt that way. We were just good friends. We went 10-8 together a lot, and we made a lot of arrests, and we chased a lot of bad guys. But I never really knew he felt that way." He said, "When you're one of the best cops I've ever known in a 30-year career." Just because you wanted to get out there and get after it, and when you were on scene, I never worried about my safety, and I was like, wow, that blew me away. Well, it was such an honor for me. Well, Willa Beckley, Ron Otterbacher, some of these folks that were amazing supervisors and amazing leaders. Yeah, I want to shout them out because I have never had a chance to tell them how amazing they were to me.
Yeah. Well, you just did, brother, and I hope they hear that. So you came from, like you said, a tumultuous childhood or adolescence. You went into probably one of the most symbolic organizations on the planet, the Marine Corps, and then you went into one of the largest sheriff's offices in Florida. Both have their own ethos, their own standards, their own conduct. And then from there, you had a pivotal moment when you were an SRD and you met a principal, a good leader that influenced you and took you down a path outside of law enforcement. So what did that look like, Mike, when you left law enforcement and you started pursuing your higher education? What did that look like, and what was your goal at the time?
Well, to be honest with you, John, going back to that principle that was such a good leader, and I want listeners to understand this because you got to wait, you got to be patient because that principal after the first year left to go get promoted. They brought another principal in. And that principal called me in and the other SRO in and said, "Hey, I don't need you here. I don't want you here, but I don't have a choice. But you guys can go to your office and you guys don't have to do anything." And of course, I was so cocky back then that I was like, "Sir, I'm going to do my job," and like 3 days later, I was moved out of that school because even with bad leaders, and he was not a great leader, and I mean that school went in a different direction after he took the helm. But he was leader enough, or he was in charge enough to get me transferred into a different school. So you learn something from that too. So I didn't know what I was going to do, John. I just knew that I went home one day. I told my wife, I said, "Hey, I'm not sure I want to raise our kids in this environment, and we're moving. We're going to move to North Florida." And we moved. This is a true story. We both moved. My wife's a nurse. We both moved without jobs, and we just knew something was going to be right. We had a little bit of savings. We went up to Tallahassee, and we both found jobs pretty quickly. And I met a guy, and I started writing programs or training programs. By that time, I was already a instructor techniques trainer. I had a bunch of different things I could go out to the academy and teach. And they used to pay very, very well to go out and teach, instructor techniques for about 80 hours, I think it was. But
Yeah.
I started writing training programs for the Department of Corrections, and I wrote one and started presenting it, and it was very good. We traveled all over the state, and we, got paid very well to do this training. And I thought this is something I really love doing, and something that I would either like to make a side hustle or do it full time. And so I've been able to do that for the last, well, heck, that was in 1999. So all those years I've been able to do that. And over the years, I've had a chance to travel internationally and do all sorts of training from, well, heck, I did time management training and leadership training for Sandals Resorts. And then I've done tactical training for the government of St. Lucia, done crowd psychology, you name it. I mean, I've just been tasked to kind of do training all over the country, all over internationally, and I've just felt blessed to do it. And like you and I've talked about, really, of course, yeah, I want to make a living doing it, but at the same time, I just love doing it and engaging with people. To see that light bulb come on is such a rush for me, and that's why I do it.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I've listened to you interact during training presentations with, deputies and other sheriff's employees across North Florida and the state. And it's always something that I pick up a nuance that you present, something that I've either forgotten about in my time or something brand new. And I think leadership is so dynamic, and I think there's such a lack of leadership these days because of some of the things that have happened in the American culture. But what you do is important. It certainly has changed my perspective, and we'll talk more about that later. But so you started to see the importance. You saw that in your childhood of good leadership and sound advice from somebody that took time to pour into you, and you got that in the Marines and the sheriff's office and with that principal. And then you went on and got your higher education and your doctorate, and then you got in the school system and you're reaching out to kids that were probably, needed somebody to pour into them. And I think that's what's led you down to the road you're on, right?
That's 100%. It's kind of the mission that I've been on. It's kind of people say, man, you got so many things done. I said, yeah, I've been busy for about 25, 30 years. I got my law enforcement military. That's one persona. And then I've got a master's degree in counseling and psychology. So I've had my own counseling practice. Then I got my doctorate in leadership because I just really wanted to pursue a higher understanding of what leadership is or what leadership was. And to be honest with you, I mean, I came away from that doctorate degree. I think I've learned some things, but I learned what I don't think leadership is and what true leadership looks like within being able to influence and inspire other people. So whether I liked the professor or whether I learned something or whether I didn't, you can't help but learn something. Like you said, you're either going to learn something you put into your toolbox or you're going to pick up on something that you want to take out of your toolbox. But yeah, so I'm just never satisfied with my own personal growth. Now, that doesn't mean I'm really not OCD about it. I mean, I love my wife and family. I spend plenty of time. We never miss time together and stuff like that. But I wake up every morning and I just try to grow because, I mean, what else is there just besides growing yourself and then helping other people grow?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's double click into leadership in today's law enforcement. So, in your travels and your research and your presentations, what do you think are, some of the key issues that are facing law enforcement professionals today? Given that there are kids, and I shouldn't say kids, I don't mean to be demeaning, but there are guys that are 22. I was 22 when I started and I was a kid, but there's people that are in law enforcement that are in their 20s, and there's people that are still in law enforcement in their 60s. So there's quite a generational gap. But amongst that group, what do you see are the biggest challenges that they're facing these days?
John, I had an investigator from the local sheriff's office come out to my school the other day, and I thought, "Are you an explorer or what?" Because he was so young and he's already an investigator. I was like, "Okay, go for it, young man. I mean, that's great." But he looked so young that I really thought he was an explorer, like a teenager just with a explorer badge on. But then I noticed he had a sidearm. I thought, okay, this guy's a legit investigator, so that's kind of funny. I
Yeah.
think, John, to be honest with you, over the years, I think besides the things that are on the surface, like trying to regain the trust of the public and those kind of things, I think the vast majority of our public, they love, the 99% of them love our law enforcement men and women, and they trust them. There's always 1% in every occupation that's going to ruin it for everybody else. And, with unethical and unprofessional behavior, there's always that. I don't care what profession you are in. But I think that I wanted to say that up front. So if you're listening to this and you're in law enforcement, I know y'all come across the people that don't like you because that's 90% of what you do. But the 99% of the law-abiding citizens out there love you and love what you do. And so thank you for doing what you do and make sure you're safe out there. But getting into the really underlying issues of law enforcement, John, you talked about generational gaps. I think that we've been doing it wrong in many ways for a long time. And I'll explain that because every year, for example, we had to go do, is it still 48 rounds in Florida? I think it's 48 round firearm course. You had to go every year and qualify with your weapon. But, the chances of you using your weapon in the line of duty are slim and none, even though it's increased over the last 20 years. It's still very uncommon for you to have to shoot somebody or use your firearm, but yet you still have the mandatory training.
Yeah, there's that huge emphasis on something that may never happen. Yeah.
That's right. So I think there should be a huge emphasis, more of an emphasis, and I don't think it would be hard to do. There needs to be more of an emphasis on who are you and who do you want to be? I mean, who you are a deputy sheriff. Yeah, you feel good about yourself. You're out there. You look great. You feel great. And you're doing a great service to your community. But is this who you want to be? And if it is, good, but really develop yourself and who you want to be. So the greatest cops out there are the cops that can run you down 3 miles, run you down for 3 miles, engage with you physically if need be, but also be able to really grab their mindset and then treat you well, to really be able to hone those skills in to where you are capable of everything from deadly force all the way down to just talking somebody into the car or counseling a child or counseling a victim or something like that. and you really have developed the capacity to be all those things. And so I'll never forget when I first heard the term emotional intelligence, and that's really what I'm talking about. It's like raising your level of leadership and emotional intelligence to a space to where if you have to, you could lay down fire very accurately because you train that way. You could also flip that switch and go right into a very compassionate counseling session with the victim and even sometimes the suspect. I've gotten many confessions from suspects by just genuinely caring about them. Maybe they made a mistake and they know they're going to jail for a long time. And and you still have a job to do. You get the confession, but then you leave there without feeling like you have had to manipulate somebody. So the emotional intelligence piece, the post-traumatic stress piece, some of these things that I think plague our officers today, I think we need to spend more time in training. Now, I see it at the school level, John. I see teachers coming in and they have not had a chance. Their college preparation programs did not do a good job of teaching them, for example, not to inappropriately touch a student. And I'm not talking about like deviant sexual behavior. I'm just talking about an innocent high five that can go wrong, an innocent hug that can go wrong. They don't spend enough time really going over the psychology of connection and how important that is, because physical touch is important. But at the same time, you can't be doing it inappropriately. Even if your intent is pure, you can't do it inappropriately. So you got to learn it. And if you're not willing to learn it, then the chances are you're going to violate it at some point, and you're rolling the dice of whether it's going to ruin your career or not. And again, I'm not even talking about those individuals that would genuinely try to harm a child. I'm really talking about someone who is innocent, but just hasn't learned and hasn't been taught to grow that capacity. And so that's where I think that we are in law enforcement. I think we need to spend more time. It's funny that you asked that, because I remember when body cams were being introduced and so many people were against it. Those body cams have been a godsend, I think, for most law enforcement officers, because again, 99% are out there doing everything the right way, and those body cams show it every day.
No, especially body worn cameras, because you're right. I mean, there were so many folks, that said, "Hey, you're never going to wear a body worn camera in my county or at my police department, because when somebody calls 911, it's the worst hour of the worst day of their life, and we're not going to record it." But once we got past that kind of shock, we do catch a lot of officers going far and beyond the call of duty, and we really capture a lot of kindness and genuine goodwill and heroism that takes place. So that's a good point about the body worn cameras, and it also shows the inherent leadership that a lot of these deputies and officers have within them. That's not trained. That's just in their nature, just by being a servant, being called to serve.
That's
So
right.
that's a great point.
I tell
So
you, John, what Nashville Police Department did several years ago, they just had a new dynamic. They just said, you know what, when our officers get involved in a shooting or something like that, and obviously we're going to investigate it with the highest level of integrity, but we're going to release the footage as soon as possible to the public. And they've stopped so many different displays and riots and stuff like that, because again, the vast majority of law-abiding citizens, they may not like it when someone gets killed in the light of duty, or if a law enforcement officer has to take a life. But when they see the footage, they realize, okay, that guy pointed a gun at him. That's what he's trained to do. So, I think they've been a great asset, as opposed to what we were scared about before.
and we'll be right back. SaferWatch and law enforcement. SaferWatch is a powerful tool that enhances public safety by improving communication between law enforcement and the community it serves. Through the SaferWatch platform, agencies can send real-time emergency and non-emergency alerts, keeping residents and visitors informed about critical incidents, safety advisories, and community updates. Additionally, SaferWatch allows the public to report crime tips, suspicious activities, and threats, providing law enforcement with valuable intelligence. SaferWatch tips have led to the prevention of school shootings, stopped sexual predators, caught wanted fugitives and burglary suspects, and has even prevented suicides. This easy-to-use two-way communication tool ensures faster response times and helps protect the community proactively. By empowering both citizens and law enforcement, SaferWatch fosters a safer, more connected community. For more information, visit saferwatchapp.com or download the free SaferWatch app on iOS or Android. Now back to the show. So along the same lines, most deputies, at least in Florida, there are plenty of rural counties in Florida, and there are also some of the biggest sheriff's offices east of the Mississippi are in Florida. But a lot of times deputies are alone. There might be 5 deputies working a county. There might be 1 deputy working a county at night. So what would you tell somebody that's coming on board about personal accountability and leadership that would help them survive in that atmosphere?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of different things. Number one, human behavior and human beings, we're all susceptible to temptation. So you need to acknowledge that. You need to acknowledge what having that badge and that car and that level of authority means. It's always a good idea to, you've heard me many times. I'm always asking, what do you read? Who you're reading? What book are you reading? And who's the author? Why are you reading it? Is it something that's helping you grow? Because you will be tempted in this job, and you will have to resist temptation in a lot of different ways. And that badge means you're wearing it with honor. And so my first thing to any law enforcement officer, even the one riding 10-8 in their own county, have honor and courage and commitment, have the integrity to do the right thing because it's the right thing. And that sounds so simple, but as you know, we see it all the time. There's too many people that roll the dice with honor and courage and integrity. And it just makes those people that really want to do a great job, it makes it harder for them. Then from a practical and tactical standpoint, I would tell them, if you're out there by yourself and your backup is, 30 or 45 an hour away, there's not many arrests out there that are worth that to get caught up in a gunfight or into a fight for your life without having some support, some help with you. There's no arrest out there that's really that important to not be tactically smart and going into a situation. Sometimes, as you know, John, that badge makes you feel 10 feet tall and benching 500 pounds. And that's just not true, but it makes you feel that way. It makes you feel invincible. So that's what I would tell them. I would tell any officer out there to get on. If you're 21, you get on. That's great. Awesome. I hope you have an amazing, safe career, but don't stop growing. The academy did a great job, probably. Don't stop growing. Always have a book. Always be reading. Always try to make your reports better. Always try to treat people with honor and dignity and compassion. And that's only going to make you a better police officer. I'm not saying that you can't be tough and you can't be that guy. Everybody knows in the agencies who those guys are that can handle themselves extremely well. There's nothing wrong with being that guy, but there is something wrong with only being that guy and not growing your capacity to be other things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, Mike. I mean, and part of what you're talking about too is tombstone courage, is what we used to call tombstone courage. You do think the badge and the oath has given you some superhuman ability to make great decisions under stress or get you out of some situations that are just not winnable. So that's a great point. And then you and I talk about books a lot. What is the importance of for somebody in law enforcement to continue to read and be a lifelong learner? From your perspective, why is that so important?
Yeah, well, I mean, I look back at historical movies and even movies, and your cops, your marshals, and you mentioned Tombstone. Your cops and your marshals sometimes are just people that would take the job because nobody else wanted it. They really didn't have to have any skills to do it. I think that, and I was one of those guys. And now I had the Marine Corps behind me, and I had some training behind me. But I went to the academy. But John, I wasn't ready. Intelligence wise. I don't think. I mean, I went through my FTO. I had no problems. I breezed through all that stuff. But I never got complaints for other things. I always got complaints for rudeness, and I really didn't even realize I was being rude. I was being myself, but no one ever pulled me aside and said, "Hey, I've been reading this book about this, and maybe you should read this. It'll help you understand yourself." So sometimes when you look at somebody or talk to somebody, you're being rude, and it comes across as rude. And I've never had anybody come across and say, "Hey, Mike, let me pull you aside and say, hey, that seemed a little rude, man. Come on, man." So there's the courage piece. Like being a leader is pulling a friend aside and saying, "Hey, man, you didn't really need to say that. You probably could have handled that better. Even though everybody's going home safe tonight, you probably could have handled that better." It only makes you a better person. And I'll just throw this in there too. It makes you better when you go home to your family. You can't just go out there and say, "I want to be the best law enforcement officer in the department. I want to get promoted when I'm supposed to get promoted." You still have a family at home and a spouse at home that deserves you to come home wanting to grow your capacity to also be good for them as well. Again, that was not something that was taught to me. I'll never forget going to Orlando. So it's always hopping. So I've been to all the murder scenes and all the different kind of scenes, But it wasn't until the drowning of the little baby that I went to that really jacked me up a lot. And I'll never forget this. I got there, the baby drowned, fell in the pool. Grandparents turned their back on the baby, walked, fell in the pool, you know, and within 5 minutes, my world was turned upside down with post-traumatic stress. I didn't know anything about post-traumatic stress. I didn't learn
Right.
about PTSD until I went and got my master's degree. But I remember my sergeant not allowing me to go to the hospital to check on that child. And that child did not make it, but I wanted to go. And here's the thing. I don't hold that sergeant accountable because I don't think he had any clue. And he wasn't growing his capacity to understand his people and to keep his people psychologically safe, as opposed to, hey, are you wearing your vest today? Or did you go to your firearms training? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But how about your psychological safety? Where's your mental health right now? And so, like you, John, I know I've had a couple of friends that I serve with that have taken their own lives because for whatever reason. And I think we're in a place now to where we really need to start developing the neuroplasticity of changing our way we think about law enforcement, and not just being able to, pass the rifle range and pass the physical fitness test.
I hear you, and yeah, you're preaching what I want to hear. So those are things that not most people are going to know about, because I still think in today's law enforcement that we're still short-staffed, still underpaid, and still doing more with less. In Florida, our governor has gone out of his way to provide additional funds, especially for the physically constrained sheriff's offices, and try to bring all of the deputies back up to a level playing field. But again, there's not a lot of time for self-improvement or self-learning, or to continue to grow. So what you just talked about with neuroplasticity and emotional intelligence and PTSD are all things that, if you and I were still on patrol today, that we would only get a spoonful of, because it might be something that's in a mandatory roll call or in training. But it is incumbent on us to be accountable to ourselves and to our peers to learn and continue to grow. So some of those things you just brought up, I just started reading about neuroplasticity at the end of last year, because I saw it and I'm like, what is that? How does that apply to me as a first responder? How do I override some of these traumatic events that I was exposed to? And that's what that's all about. But I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't continued to read and learn. So that's a great point.
Well, I'm always trying to recommend books. I've finished, I've always talked about resilience. I've read that one several times. I finished The Wisdom of the Bullfrog. That was recommended to me by one of the sergeants in our last class. I think it was, or two classes ago. And then I saw,
Yeah, it was excellent. I read that too. Yeah.
yeah, Wisdom of the Bullfrog is fantastic. But John, I'm going to turn you on to something different, John. It's called Inner Excellence by Jim Murphy. And it's a little bit bigger book, but man, I'm telling you, it could be for me, it's the newest thing. I share all this stuff. I share all these things with my staff. I've got my entire staff, about 100, going through resilience right now on a book study. They're loving it. And I send them an email every day to quote Inner Excellence by Jim Murphy. It is groundbreaking in many, many ways. You'll find a lot of it as, you'll find it simple, but then it'll resonate with you in some way, And so if I was a sheriff or a chief of police, I would be giving this kind of stuff to my troops all the time, because, like when I teach for you, John, and around Florida, you have some that they figure they have all the answers and they don't want, and that's okay. But so I've had so many people over the last couple of years, they'll still reach out to me. I'll get texts in the morning at 5 a.m. Hey, Doc, I'm going to the gym. Let's go, and I'm like, I love that, because they took something away from the leadership presentation, and they're still making book recommendations for me. And one thing I learned many years ago, John, if I respect you and you recommend a book, I'm going to get that book. I am going to get the book, because
Same.
it's just wisdom. And so that's what I've learned over the years. And that's what I try to help people understand, is that when I get up in front of somebody, you're not talking about someone who went 25 years in law enforcement and became a major or became a sheriff or something like that. You're talking about someone who struggled through 10 years, just struggled to get over his own self, not to struggle to I'm a rule follower, man. I want to do a good job. I was always ethical. I was always fair, compassionate, but I couldn't get over myself. And I wish I would have had, well, I look back and I'm like, I'm glad that happened, because now I am who I am now. But then again, I kind of wish I would have had one mentor, one supervisor really pull me aside and said, hey, read this book, or let's talk at least once a week, and, dial you in on what really matters is your future, not just the moment, and so glad that I went through that, man. I love my time at the sheriff's office.
Yeah, well, you touched on something good, maybe even something great. Is I was always taught is you need to continually have a mentor and a mentee, and I carry that on to this day. I have at least two people that I consider mentors that I talk to regularly about what it's like to be at my age and at my stage in law enforcement or my stage in life. And then I have a handful of people that call me for mentoring, and it's an honor to answer the phone and be able to help them and guide them away from some of the landmines that I just walked right into, either because I was unaware of something or I was just plain stupid. So that's good. And then having somebody I can call that has gone down the path before me is also it's gives you hope, so that those are good things as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely. Well, I remember in the academy. Do you remember Officer? Is it Officer Ponce de Leon?
Ernie Ponce de Leon, yeah.
Ernie Ponce. He was shot and killed while right at the end of our academy, and so we all left there just wanting to catch bad people. We were pissed off, and I think that was an appropriate emotional response, but we also need to keep our emotions in check. And in this job, as you know, as any listener knows, if your emotions aren't in check, if your house is not in order, it's really hard to do this job with fidelity.
Yeah. Yeah. Good word. Let me ask you this, Mike. So somebody reaches out to you and they say, "Hey, we'd like you to come down and tell us about leadership." What would you use as your guidebook? Hey, speaking of books, we haven't even brought up the book that you wrote. Let's get into that in just a second. But what would you do? How would you take the temperature before you started presenting?
Well, I always try to get the temperature, as you say, from the chief or the sheriff, and then or the commanding officer. What kind of, because I like to design programs specifically to meet the need of the department. And as you know, you and I've traveled around for over 2 years now, and there always seems to be a different need that they're really wanting us to highlight. And so whether it's trust versus mistrust, or whether it's high functioning teams compared to teams that aren't high functioning, what does it take to be a high functioning team, those kind of things. So what I would do is go in and just kind of engage in that dialogue with the person that's bringing us down and get feedback from them, and then design it, make recommendations, and design it from there. 9 times out of 10, and this is, I didn't realize going into this work with the Sheriff's Association, but as you know, the first time we did it, it was just, hey, great leadership class, and they really didn't kind of specify that they were having any issues. But since then, it seems like every place that we've gone, they've really wanted us to kind of dial in on specific things, whether it was resilience or trust or, that kind of thing. And so, and I think that's good. I think that's healthy for an agency to realize that they need to grow in specific areas. And so I try to identify those things and help them identify those areas they want to grow. And then I just kind of, I'm a very transparent person. I don't believe in not being transparent. So, but sometimes they want to kind of, sheriffs and chiefs want to kind of massage it a little bit. They don't want you to come in, guns a-blazing, so to speak, but they do want them to leave there with something to chew on and something to grow on. So I just try to help develop that. And then I go back and I develop the presentation according to that, and then at the end of the day, the question that I always ask them up front: who are you? Who are you? And who do you want to be? And if you can't understand who you are, at least dial into who you are right now. And we spend the first hour or two trying to get people to figure out who they are and to be honest with themselves. This is who I am, but this is who I want to be. And I always use like the whole, I want to run a marathon, or I want to lose 25 pounds, but I don't want to do the things that are required of me to do that. Well, you have a different issue than what I'm trying to explain to you from a leadership perspective. Now, if you say I'll do anything, the doctor said I had to lose 50 pounds or I'm going to be really bad shape, then you're more motivated because the doctor said, but here's what you have to do that. Can you get to that space? And so what I try to do is help them find themselves, change the neuroplasticity in their brain to really rewire it to get after it so they can accomplish whatever it is. You want to run a marathon? You can't run a marathon without running. You have to run. And so, but most people just want to go out there and run a marathon, and they're not able to do that. So It's things like that. I just try to make sure it's authentic, and I try to make sure it's never the same presentation, John.
Yeah, and that's what I like about what you do because it's not canned. I mean, you do your research, you find out what are the challenges going on in an organization, and then you do sit down with the CEO and find out specifically what he or she might perceive the issues are. And then when you get into the class, I mean, sometimes the classes get dicey, right? I mean, sometimes there's some people that really speak their truth and it's uncomfortable, but it's also necessary, right? I mean, we need to include that, but some of the classes we did at one particular county, you know what I'm talking about. There were some dicey conversations that came out of that, but I think at the end of the presentation, everybody seemed to be back on the same sheet of music, and you still hear from some of those people from that particular county, right?
Yeah, I hear them all the time, and they'll, like friends with a lot of them on Facebook. My wife's birthday was yesterday, so I put some on Facebook. Most of all of them said happy birthday, Joyce, and that kind of thing. So I love that. And yeah, that particular county, man, they were suffering. And I think that, not to beat my chest, but I think the way you introduced me, you say, hey, Mike might step on your toes today. And, if I don't have to step on your toes, I don't want to. But if I have to, then come on, then be grown up enough to at least evaluate what I'm trying to say for your own personal growth. But the comments that I heard from that particular county, and I felt so blessed that they received it so well. But some people didn't want to hear what I had to say because they had to be confronted with their own inability to grow their leadership capacity. And then they have since, the two that I'm speaking of, I think you were in the room, they've reached out several times since then, and they actually reached out the same day on my drive back home and apologized. And there was no apology necessary. I mean, if we can transparently talk about how to help each other grow, because I grow from every time I go somewhere, and I grow, and I feel that I've grown my capacity in leadership. So yeah, but I think there's probably a lot of agencies out there that feel like, or people in agencies that feel like they're not being guided by great leaders, and I think that's also true. In this one particular county, they really felt strongly that it was such a toxic environment. But leadership training and being authentic with who you are can really help with that.
Yeah, and you displayed that in that particular presentation because it's being a leader is not just cookie cutter. It's tough. You have to make some tough calls. You have to have some tough conversations, and not everybody's going to walk out of your office feeling warm and fuzzy. But that's just the way it goes sometimes because of the greater good. So I applaud you on that, and that's what I like about your leadership style is that we all need our toes stepped on sometimes to remind us, this is the way. But Mike, tell us about the book that you wrote. Tell the listener, the title, why you wrote it, and why it's so important to you, and then even tell them where they can get a copy.
Well, I've written a book, written a couple books. The one you're referring to is called OoRah Leadership. Now, OoRah is a Marine Corps term. We say it a lot in the Marine Corps. It's just to motivate each other. And I was sitting back one day in a doctoral class, and I was listening to the professor talk about leadership, and then he was talking about all the things that he hadn't done. He's read the books about leadership and transformational, transactional, resilient, emotionally intelligent leader, servant leader. And we had to learn all these different styles, transactional leader. And I started reading them, and I started thinking, why do I got to pick one? I am a servant leader. I'll do anything for you. I'll help you. I'll leave right now, John, and come to Daytona Beach if you called me and said I need you. And I think you believe that, because I would.
I know you would.
Yes, I would. You could call me from anywhere, and I'm on the road and I'm a servant, and I'll serve. And I had a kid the other day. I was picking up trash in the parking lot. And the kid said, "Doc, why are you doing that?" I was in a tie and a coat. So why are you doing that? I said, because what do you mean? It's our school. I want to keep it clean. That's not your job. I said, it's absolutely my job. My job is to do everything on this. You got to be a servant. And so, but I'm also a transactional and transformational. I like to continue to build so I just wasn't buying into the different leadership styles. And I didn't think that people should paint themselves into a leadership style. Because if you're a servant leadership, does that mean you don't have to be a good transformational leader? No, you need to be really good at all that. And if you're not, then you can grow that capacity. And so I just thought, I'm just going to come up with my own leadership style. If you're going to pick a style, I'm just going to call it OoRah Leadership, because I learned all about leadership in the Marine Corps. That was the foundation of my leadership journey. And I just picked OoRah Leadership, and I was just trying to be creative. And then I started saying, how do you write a book? And I Googled how do you write a book? And all the pages said, just start typing. And so I just started typing, and I told a bunch of personal stories, and then I related those to leadership opportunities and capacity, and and how to thrive from a failing moment, and then how to grind in times when you don't want to grind, and those kind of things. And so next thing I know, I've got close to, I think, 300 pages. And now when you buy this book or you get this book from me, remember, I edited it myself, so you're going to probably find mistakes, but next time I am definitely going to pay somebody to edit it, because I'm not a very good editor. I can write and tell a story, but I had some lady from Wisconsin call me. I don't know how she got it. She's a friend of Leilani's, my sister. Lonnie, and
I sure do.
She said, "Mike, this book has changed my life. I'm reading it I'm on the second read." And I said, "That is amazing. Thank you for the compliment." She goes, "Yeah, but I found a lot of mistakes." I was like, "Okay." So let's go. Okay, appreciate the honest feedback. I'll grow from that, and I'll learn from that. So I just wanted to, John, to be honest with you, I wanted to write a book. Why? Because no one ever told me I could write a book. And I had gotten a doctorate degree and then a master's degree and all this other stuff I got going on. And I got to speak to 5,000 people at a conference. And I started feeling really like a little somewhat accomplished. But at the same time, I'm very, very humble, because I understand where I started this journey. And I thought, I want to write a book. I want to be able to say I wrote a book. Then when I start reading like The Wisdom of the Bullfrog, I'm thinking, now that's a book. That's the kind of book I want to write next. And I'm already on my third book, John, but I won't give you the secrets right now, but I'll tell you when we get in person. But when I read The Wisdom of the Bullfrog, and then I'm reading Inner Excellence right now, yeah, it just inspired me to write a third one, but for a different reason. And I know we don't have too much time, but I'm writing my third book for a different reason. I wrote my first book to say I wrote a book, to be honest with you, and I'm glad that people like it. The third book is going to be much more authentic, and then it's going to be more of a leadership how-to, and it's really coming from the heart more so than just trying to get a book out there, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. And Mike, what you just confirmed for me and our listeners is, yes, you're Dr. Michael Steele, but you're also my friend, Mike, and you're also a leader who is willing to step out and make mistakes, even if they're grammatical or typos, and have somebody call you out on it and not be offended, but instead be grateful. And that also reaffirms that at your heart, you're still a knuckle dragger like the rest of us. So
That's true.
I love that.
That is very, very true. Everywhere I've ever been, I've always tried to get on with the reserves or try to do something, and I just don't have the time to do it. But the sheriff's children go to my school, and he stops by all the time. We get to chat a lot. He's a super good guy. And my SRO is a former Marine, but he's retiring at the end of this year. So, man, I love it. I love being around type A personalities and people that want to help other people. There's nothing better than knowing you're only making 50 grand a year and you're risking your life every night. What a great calling that is, because I'm not sure you can find a higher level of integrity than that.
No, amen to that. Mike, is there a place where people could go find your book? Is it on Amazon? If somebody wanted to read more about you or your book, where could they go?
It is on Amazon, but
it
is on Amazon, but Amazon has it priced incorrectly. They've got like $39, and I wouldn't spend $39 on it. It should be priced somewhere in the $12 range. You can also buy it on the Kindle if you want to. The best bet is to reach out to me, direct message me. My wife and I share a Facebook. It's Mike and Joyce Steele. Message me and I'll send you a copy. I mean, I don't care to make money on the book. I just hope people enjoy it. And then if you're out there and I can come to your agency and provide any training, I think John will tell you that, I'm very, very reasonable. And, if you don't like it, if you don't like the training, or if you feel like it was not worthwhile, it's free. I won't charge you a nickel. I just want to help people, and I want people to realize that there's never a moment in your life where you should think that you've grown enough. You should always be growing in every way, always in every way. And if I can help anybody do that, one person, or if I can help 150 in your agency, I'd be glad to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And I know that it's genuine, and it's you're so authentic, and I do appreciate you so much. For our listeners, if you go to our webpage at fldeputisheriffs.org, click on the Programs tab, scroll down to Training, you'll see that Dr. Steele is going to join us June 11th, 2025 at the Franklin County Sheriff's Office. And Dr. Steele is going to present OoRah Leadership, the Tip of the Spear Transformation. If you'd like to join us at that location, click on the tab that says register and sign up for the course. Like every class that we offer from the Florida Deputy Sheriff's Association, it's free. We pay for it. We think we bring state-of-the-art, relevant, necessary training to deputies across the state of Florida. And part of that program is people like Dr. Michael Steele. So, Doc, as always, it's such a pleasure to have you on with me, and I'm glad we spoke today about some of the details. And then the other thing I wanted to mention real quick is you're doing a second class this year in 2025 that's also at the Putnam County Sheriff's Office. The first class is in Franklin County. The second class is September 15th. It's at the Putnam County Sheriff's Office. And again, click on the register tab and come. It's free. So there's an opportunity to either see Dr. Steele near the Gulf of Mexico down in beautiful Franklin County, or over on the East Coast in Putnam County. So I look forward to seeing you guys there. Mike, I look forward to seeing you as well. And I'm sure we'll have other training that we could talk about later. And I hope to have you back on another time to really unpack some of the issues facing law enforcement today and how you can strengthen our deputies moving forward.
Well, John, thank you for having me on, as always. Also, I think you got me scheduled for an hour and a half at the conference in Jacksonville in May.
Yes, you're 100%. At our first annual tactical conference, it's May 28th, 29th, and 30th in Jacksonville, Florida, and Mike is one of our presenters, and I'm very excited about that opportunity as well.
Yeah, so I hope to meet you all, whoever's going to listen to this. I hope this goes well. I want to can't thank enough, the Florida Deputy Sheriff's Association. What an agency that their mission is just to serve deputy sheriffs across the state of Florida. And so many have been blessed by that organization. So I couldn't be more thankful to be associated with you, John, and with your agency.
Well, thank you. Well, listeners, that's all we have for today. Thanks for tuning in. And if you like what we're doing, share it with a friend. Thank you for listening to The Tactical Pause, the official podcast of the Florida Deputy Sheriff's Association. FDSA proudly serves over 25,000 deputy sheriffs across the state with legal benefits, vital training, and financial assistance in times of need. You can listen to previous episodes at fldeputisheriffs.org or wherever you get your podcasts. If you've enjoyed the show, please leave us a review and encourage your friends, coworkers, and those in the law enforcement community to listen as well. To learn more about the Florida Deputy Sheriff's Association and how we serve those who serve, visit our website at fldeputisheriffs.org.